You do not lack discipline. You lack a pause. Every mistake you regret came from speed. Every reaction you wish you could take back happened too fast. Life does not defeat you through force. It defeats you through urgency. When you move without pausing, you surrender control. When you pause, choice returns. This audiobook is about that moment. The space between impulse and action. Control is built there. Power is recovered there. Learn to command the pause. And everything else follows. Most people believe they act with intention. They do not. They move because something inside them pushes. An urge. A discomfort. A spike of emotion. And they obey it. This is impulse. Impulse feels natural. It feels honest. It feels alive. It is none of those things. Impulse is untrained behavior. Most actions taken impulsively are not chosen. They are released. That's the key. When you act on impulse, you are not deciding. You are discharging tension. You speak to relieve pressure. You move to escape discomfort. You decide to stop feeling, not to move forward. This pattern runs constantly. Someone sends a message. You reply without thinking. A thought appears. You follow it immediately. A feeling rises. You act to satisfy it. None of this is control. It is reflex. You have a choice. But impulse hides it. Impulse moves too fast for choice to appear. Control begins when movement slows. This is not philosophy. It is mechanics. Between impulse and action, there must be a pause. Without that pause, discipline does not exist. Stillness is what creates that pause. Not stillness as calm. Stillness as interruption. Interruption of speed. Interruption of habit. That's the key. Most people believe their impulses are who they are. They say, that's just how I am. I act on instinct. I go with my gut. This is not identity. It is conditioning. Impulse is trained through repetition. The more you act without pausing, the stronger impulse becomes. The mind learns one rule. Move immediately. And over time, movement replaces thinking. You do not need their permission to slow down. Nothing external requires you to move at that speed. Impulse convinces you otherwise. Impulse says, act now. Say something. Do something. It creates urgency without consequence analysis. That is why impulse creates regret. Not because the intention was wrong, but because the timing was uncontrolled. You have a choice. But only if you interrupt impulse. The interruption must happen early. Not after words are spoken. Not after action is taken. Before. This is the skill. You must learn to recognize the first internal push. The moment the body leans forward. The moment the chest tightens. The moment the urge to respond appears. That is the signal. Do not act yet. Do not analyze yet. Pause. This pause does not need to be long. It needs to be consistent. A few seconds is enough to break the reflex. That's the key. Most people believe they need more control over outcomes. They do not. They need control over initiation. The beginning of action determines everything that follows. Impulse contaminates the beginning. Once contaminated, correction is expensive. Stillness cleans the starting point. Stillness does not remove emotion. It removes obedience to emotion. That distinction matters. It's not about eliminating the urge. It's about not letting it lead. Impulse wants immediate relief. Control wants long-term alignment. It's not about comfort. It's about discipline. Impulse moves you toward relief. Discipline moves you toward results. You have a choice. Impulse thrives in unexamined moments. Moments of boredom. Moments of tension. Moments of uncertainty. Instead of staying present, the mind escapes forward. Action becomes avoidance. You reply to avoid discomfort. You speak to avoid silence. You decide to avoid thinking. This is not strength. It is avoidance disguised as action. Stillness exposes this pattern. When you pause, discomfort surfaces. That is expected. Discomfort is what impulse was protecting you from. Do not flee. Observe it. Observation weakens impulse. Each time you pause without acting, impulse loses authority. That's the key. You are training a new default. Pause first. Then choose. This training is mechanical, not emotional. You do not need to feel calm. You do not need to feel confident. You only need to delay movement. Delay breaks reflex. Reflex loses power. Choice returns. You have a choice. This applies everywhere. Before speaking. Before replying. Before making decisions. Impulse often speaks louder than reason. Do not argue with it. Do not justify it. Just pause. Pausing does not mean doing nothing forever. It means you do not move until clarity appears. Clarity requires stillness. Stillness creates space. Space allows evaluation. Evaluation produces control. That's the sequence. Most people reverse it. They move first. Then explain. Then regret. Discipline reverses the order. Observe first. Pause. Then act. Impulse fades when it is not obeyed. It is not fed by resistance. It is starved by inaction. This is how habits change. Not through force. Through interruption. You don't need their permission to interrupt your own behavior. No one will give it to you. This is internal authority. Internal authority begins with restraint. Restraint is strength. Impulse mistakes restraint for weakness. It is wrong. Restraint preserves energy. Impulse wastes it. Restraint preserves position. Impulse leaks it. That's the key. You will fail at this sometimes. You will react. You will move too fast. This does not invalidate training. What matters is recovery speed. When you notice impulse after the fact, stop immediately. Do not continue out of momentum. Stopping mid-pattern is control regained. Many people keep reacting because they believe consistency matters. Consistency without discipline is stubbornness. You have a choice. Impulse wants completion. Control wants correctness. Choose correctness. Over time, something changes. The urge still appears. But it weakens. The pause becomes natural. You begin to feel space automatically. That space is freedom. Not freedom from responsibility. Freedom from compulsion. This is the foundation. Without this, nothing else holds. Focus collapses. Discipline fractures. Control disappears. This chapter was about the beginning of action. The moment where everything is decided. You now understand that impulse is not truth. It is habit. And habit can be retrained. But slowing impulse is only the first step. To maintain control, you must learn how to protect that pause from speed. Because speed is the primary enemy of choice. Next, you will learn why speed destroys judgment and how to slow time internally without stopping action. Speed looks impressive. It is not effective. Most people equate speed with competence. They believe fast decisions signal confidence. They believe immediate action proves strength. This belief quietly destroys judgment. Speed removes evaluation. Evaluation protects outcomes. That's the key. When you move too fast, you skip reality. You act on incomplete information. You act on emotion, not understanding. Speed compresses thinking. The faster you move, the fewer options you see. Choice shrinks. You have a choice. But speed hides it. Speed creates the illusion that delay is dangerous. It is not. Delay used correctly is precision. Most regret does not come from waiting. It comes from rushing. Words said too soon. Decisions made too early. Commitments accepted without clarity. These mistakes do not come from lack of intelligence. They come from uncontrolled timing. Speed is the enemy of choice because it removes sequence. Sequence matters. First observation. Then evaluation. Then action. Speed reverses this order. Action happens first. Explanation follows later. Damage appears last. That's the key. Look at how speed operates in your daily life. A message arrives. You feel pressure to respond immediately. Why? Because silence feels like risk. It is not. Risk comes from responding without clarity. You don't need their permission to take time. No one owns your timing. Speed is often social. People rush because they fear judgment. They fear appearing slow. They fear missing something. This fear is unfounded. Accuracy earns respect. Speed earns noise. Stillness restores accuracy. When you slow internally, time expands subjectively. You see more. You notice more. That is not imagination. It is neurological reality. Speed narrows attention. Stillness widens it. That's the key. Speed also amplifies emotion. Anger feels stronger when rushed. Anxiety feels urgent when accelerated. Slow the process, and emotion loses volume. You are not calmer because life changed. You are calmer because perception changed. This is control. Speed removes this control. Under speed, the body tightens. Breath shortens. Muscles brace. This state is not optimal for judgment. The body believes there is danger. And when the body believes there is danger, the mind looks for escape. Escape is not strategy. Stillness interrupts this chain. Slow the body. The mind follows. That's the key. Speed also encourages overcommitment. When you decide quickly, you say yes too easily. You agree before understanding cost. Later, resentment appears. Not because the task was wrong, but because the decision was rushed. You have a choice. Say yes slowly. Say no calmly. Both require restraint. Speed pushes you toward compliance. Control requires delay. This is not avoidance. It is filtration. Only what survives the pause deserves commitment. Speed lets everything in. Then discipline collapses under overload. Stillness protects capacity. Capacity determines consistency. Consistency determines results. That's the chain. Most people live in reaction because speed feels necessary. It is not. Urgency is often manufactured. By others. By systems. By habits. Speed benefits whoever created the urgency. Rarely you. Pause long enough, and urgency exposes itself. What happens if I wait? Ask this question. Most of the time, nothing meaningful changes. The illusion breaks. That's the key. Speed also creates shallow thinking. You move from input to output without depth. Depth requires time. Time requires restraint. Stillness gives you access to depth. Depth improves judgment. Judgment reduces error. Error reduction is progress. This is not dramatic. It is mechanical. Speed sabotages this process. People who appear decisive are often just fast. Decisiveness without clarity is recklessness. True decisiveness comes after evaluation. Evaluation requires space. Space requires stillness. You have a choice. Live fast and correct later. Or slow first and move cleanly. Correction costs energy. Clean action conserves it. Conservation builds endurance. Endurance beats intensity. Always. Speed also trains impatience. When you move quickly, you expect results quickly. When results delay, frustration appears. This frustration fuels more speed. The cycle accelerates. Stillness breaks the cycle. You adjust expectation. You respect process. Process produces stable outcomes. Speed produces spikes and crashes. That's the key. Slowing does not mean stopping. It means internal regulation. Externally, you can still move decisively. But internally, you are calm. This is the difference between chaos and command. Command feels quiet. Quiet does not mean weak. It means controlled. Controlled action looks slower from the outside. But it travels further. Because it does not require repair. Speed creates debris. Debris must be cleaned later. That is wasted time. Stillness avoids debris. Stillness is efficient. Efficiency compounds. You don't need their permission to operate this way. The world rewards results, not haste. Those who last understand timing. They are not slow. They are deliberate. They wait until clarity appears. Then they act without hesitation. Hesitation disappears when decision is clean. Speed causes hesitation later. Stillness prevents it. That's the key. Begin practicing this deliberately. When something demands immediate response, pause internally. Do not announce it. Do not justify it. Just wait. Observe what changes. Pressure fades. Clarity improves. Then respond. Your responses will become shorter. More precise. More effective. People will feel the difference. Not because you explain it. Because control is perceptible. This practice must be repeated. Speed is habit. Habits resist change. Expect discomfort. Discomfort is not danger. It is the signal that training is occurring. You have a choice. Each time you slow down internally, you reinforce discipline. Each time you rush, you reinforce impulse. Choose reinforcement wisely. Speed is attractive. It promises relief. Relief is temporary. Control lasts. This chapter is about reclaiming timing. Not external time. Internal time. When internal time is slowed, external pressure loses power. You now understand why speed destroys choice. But speed is not the only threat. Even when you slow down, emotion can still take control. To maintain discipline, you must learn to separate feeling from action. That is the next step. Emotion appears before permission. Always has. That is not the problem. The problem is what happens next. Most people feel something and immediately act on it. They assume the feeling is a command. It is not. Emotion is a signal. Action is a decision. Confusing the two destroys control. That's the key. When you feel anger, nothing requires you to speak. When you feel fear, nothing requires you to retreat. When you feel excitement, nothing requires you to rush forward. Emotion informs. It does not decide. You have a choice. But only if you separate feeling from action. Without separation, emotion leads and discipline follows behind, if at all. Most regret is not about what was felt. It is about what was done because of it. Words spoken while angry. Decisions made while anxious. Commitments accepted while excited. Later, clarity returns. The cost remains. That cost is timing. Stillness is what creates separation. Not suppression. Not denial. Space. Space between sensation and movement. That space is where discipline lives. Most people never build it. They believe expression is honesty. They believe holding back is weakness. They are wrong. Unfiltered expression is not honesty. It is reactivity. Honesty without control is instability. Control does not lie. It chooses timing. That's the key. When emotion appears, the body reacts first. Heart rate increases. Muscles tighten. Breath shortens. The mind follows with stories, interpretations, assumptions, narratives. If you act here, emotion is in charge. Instead, pause. Do not argue with the feeling. Do not justify it. Observe it. Notice the physical sensation, not the story. This distinction matters. Stories feed emotion. Sensation passes. When you observe sensation without acting, emotion loses momentum. This is not willpower. It is mechanics. Emotion accelerates when acted on. It decays when left alone. That's the key. Most emotional damage happens fast. The first message. The first sentence. The first reaction. After that, people keep going out of momentum. They believe stopping would be inconsistent. Consistency without discipline is stubbornness. You have a choice. Stopping mid-reaction is not failure. It is recovery. Recovery speed matters more than perfection. If you react, pause immediately after. Do not continue out of pride. Pride is another emotion. Stillness applies there too. Emotion does not disappear with maturity. It disappears with training. People who seem calm are not unemotional. They are regulated. They feel everything. They obey selectively. That is discipline. Discipline does not mean numbness. It means order. Order inside creates stability outside. That's the key. Anger is a common example. Anger often signals boundary violation. That information can be useful. The action taken immediately rarely is. Pause. Let the heat rise. Let it peak. Let it fall. Do not speak yet. When clarity returns, decide what response serves your objective. Response. Not reaction. A response is chosen. A reaction is released. You don't need their permission to wait. Waiting does not invalidate your position. It strengthens it. Fear works the same way. Fear signals uncertainty. It does not define danger. If you obey fear immediately, direction collapses. Pause. Slow the body. Ground attention. Then decide based on facts, not sensation. Fear exaggerates. Stillness corrects exaggeration. That's the key. Excitement is also dangerous. It pushes speed. It reduces caution. Many long-term problems begin during moments of excitement. Commitments made too quickly. Promises given without structure. Pause even when emotion feels positive. Discipline applies in all states. You have a choice. Most people believe emotional expression is necessary for health. It is not. Unexamined expression creates chaos. Regulated expression creates clarity. Expression is a tool, not a requirement. You decide when to use it. That decision requires stillness. Stillness does not reject emotion. It contains it. Contained emotion becomes power. Uncontained emotion becomes noise. Noise drains energy. Control preserves it. That's the key. Notice how emotion interacts with urgency. Emotion pushes speed. Speed removes evaluation. Evaluation is what prevents damage. This is why emotional decisions feel right in the moment and wrong later. Later, emotion has passed. Reality remains. Train yourself to wait for reality. Emotion is temporary. Consequences are not. Stillness allows you to respect that difference. You don't need their permission to feel without reacting. This applies internally as well. Internal dialogue can be emotional. Self-criticism. Self-justification. These loops amplify feeling. Reduce commentary. Observe thought without engaging. This is the same skill. Emotion feeds on attention. Remove attention. Emotion weakens. That's the key. This does not happen instantly. Training takes repetition. You will forget. You will react. Do not dramatize it. Dramatization is another emotional reaction. Notice. Pause. Correct. That sequence builds discipline. Discipline is not force. It is consistency. Consistency creates trust with yourself. Trust reduces internal conflict. Conflict fuels emotion. Order dissolves it. Over time, emotions still arise, but they move faster. They do not linger. They do not lead. Your responses become shorter, cleaner, more deliberate. You waste less energy explaining yourself. You do not need to convince emotion. You only need to outlast it. That's the key. Separating feeling from action is one of the most important skills you will ever train. Without it, speed returns. Impulse returns. With it, control stabilizes. But even with emotional regulation, another force pressures action constantly. Urgency. Urgency pushes movement even when emotion is quiet. If you do not understand it, it will override discipline. Now that you know how to observe emotion without obeying it, you must learn how urgency distorts judgment and how to resist it. Urgency feels serious. That is why it works. Most people believe urgency comes from reality. It rarely does. Urgency is pressure, not importance. Pressure demands speed. Speed removes judgment. That's the key. When something feels urgent, the mind stops evaluating. It narrows focus. It seeks immediate relief. Relief feels productive. It is not. Urgency does not ask if action is correct. It only asks if action is fast. This is how mistakes are made. Most regret is not about effort. It is about timing. Words said too soon. Decisions made under pressure. Commitments accepted without clarity. Urgency pushes action before thinking is complete. You have a choice. But urgency tries to erase it. Urgency says, now or never. Decide immediately. You will lose something if you wait. Most of the time, this is false. Real urgency is rare. Emergencies involving safety. Deadlines with irreversible consequences. Everything else only feels urgent. Messages. Requests. Expectations. None of these require instant obedience. Stillness exposes this difference. When you pause, urgency weakens. That's the key. Notice how urgency affects the body. Breathing shortens. Muscles tighten. Movement accelerates. This is not clarity. This is stress response. Stress response is designed for survival, not decision-making. Under stress, the body prepares to escape. Escape is not strategy. Stillness interrupts this response. Slow the body. The mind follows. This is not relaxation. It is regulation. Regulation restores judgment. Most people skip this step. They act while regulated by pressure, and later wonder why outcomes feel unstable. You don't need their permission to slow down. Urgency often comes from other people. Their anxiety, their lack of planning, their desire for control. If you absorb their urgency, you inherit their problem. Pause long enough, and urgency reveals who it benefits. Often, not you. That's the key. People rush because they fear appearing unresponsive. They believe speed equals competence. It does not. Accuracy builds respect. Speed builds noise. Controlled individuals are not slow. They are deliberate. They move after evaluation. Urgency hates evaluation. Evaluation exposes exaggeration. Ask yourself one question when urgency appears. What actually happens if I wait? Do not answer emotionally. Answer factually. Most urgency collapses under this question. Nothing breaks. Nothing is lost. The illusion dissolves. Stillness returns control. You have a choice. Urgency also operates internally. Self-imposed pressure. Artificial timelines. Unrealistic expectations. You tell yourself, I should be further by now. I need to decide today. These thoughts create internal urgency. Internal urgency is just as destructive. It pushes movement without alignment. Stillness slows internal pressure. Pause before acting on self-imposed deadlines. Ask the same question. What actually happens if I wait? Often, nothing meaningful changes. Progress is not erased by patience. It is protected by it. That's the key. Urgency also distorts communication. Under pressure, people over-explain. They justify. They defend. This weakens position. Controlled communication requires timing. Silence under urgency is powerful. It signals stability. You don't need their permission to remain silent. Silence does not mean agreement. It means you are not rushing to relieve pressure. Most conflicts survive on urgency. Remove urgency, and conflict loses fuel. Stillness stars escalation. Urgency also creates false priorities. Everything feels important. When everything is important, nothing is prioritized correctly. Stillness restores hierarchy. Important things survive the pause. Trivial things do not. This is how discipline is protected. Discipline collapses when urgency dictates order. Order must come from intention. Intention requires space. Space requires stillness. That's the sequence. Most people live inside urgency. They rush from task to task, message to message, problem to problem. They feel busy. They are not effective. Effectiveness comes from correct sequencing. Sequencing is impossible under pressure. Stillness restores sequencing. One thing at a time. In the right order. This reduces error. Error reduction is progress. Urgency produces movement. Stillness produces results. You have a choice. Urgency trains impatience. When you move fast, you expect results fast. When results delay, frustration appears. Frustration fuels more urgency. The cycle accelerates. Stillness breaks the cycle. You accept process. You respect timing. Process compounds. Urgency spikes and crashes. This is why people burn out. Not from effort. From pressure. Pressure without control exhausts the system. Stillness conserves energy. Energy preserved is power available later. That's the key. Urgency also creates attachment to outcome. You want resolution now. This attachment clouds judgment. Stillness shifts focus back to process. Process is controllable. Outcome is not. When you focus on process, urgency loses influence. Action becomes cleaner. Cleaner action reduces need for correction. Correction costs time. Stillness saves it. You don't need their permission to operate at your pace. Your pace is a strategic choice, not a reaction. People who control. Timing control direction. Those who rush follow pressure. Pressure is not leadership. Leadership is restraint. Restraint is discipline. Discipline requires stillness. That's the key. Begin practicing this deliberately. When something feels urgent, pause internally. Do not announce it. Do not justify it. Just wait. Observe what changes. Pressure fades. Clarity improves. Then respond. Your responses will be fewer. Shorter. More precise. People will feel the difference. Not because you explain it. Because control is perceptible. This practice must be repeated. Urgency is habit. Habits resist change. Expect discomfort. Discomfort is not danger. It is the signal that training is occurring. You have a choice. Each time you resist urgency, discipline strengthens. Each time you obey it, reaction is reinforced. Choose reinforcement carefully. Urgency promises relief. Relief is temporary. Control lasts. This chapter was about exposing urgency. Seeing it for what it is. Not truth. Not importance. Pressure. Now you understand how urgency distorts judgment and why stillness restores it. But even when urgency is managed, another threat remains. Distraction. Distraction weakens attention quietly. Without pressure. Without noise. And attention is where discipline lives. Next, you will learn why distraction is the real enemy of control and how to eliminate it deliberately. Distraction does not attack loudly. It erodes quietly. That is why most people underestimate it. Urgency pressures you to move. Distraction pulls you away. Both destroy control. Distraction does it without resistance. That's the key. Distraction fragments attention. Fragmented attention cannot sustain discipline. You cannot control what you cannot hold. Most people believe distraction is harmless. A quick check. A brief scroll. A momentary shift. They are wrong. Every distraction trains the mind to abandon focus. Each interruption teaches your attention a rule. Leave what you are doing. Repeat this often enough, and staying becomes difficult. Not because you are weak. Because you are trained to leave. You have a choice. Distraction is not random. It follows predictable patterns. Boredom. Discomfort. Uncertainty. When effort increases, the mind looks for escape. Distraction provides it. Escape feels relieving. Relief feels productive. It is neither. Relief ends effort. Effort builds results. That's the conflict. Distraction replaces effort with stimulation. Stimulation feels active. It produces nothing. Stillness feels empty. It produces everything. This reversal confuses people. They chase stimulation and avoid stillness. As a result, control weakens over time. Distraction destroys the pause. The pause requires continuity. Distraction breaks continuity. Every time you shift attention unnecessarily, you reset momentum. Momentum is fragile. It takes time to build and seconds to lose. Most people never stay focused long enough to experience momentum. They confuse movement with progress. They are busy. They are not effective. That's the key. Distraction also damages emotional regulation. When attention jumps constantly, emotion follows. You become reactive. Not because life is intense. Because focus is unstable. Stillness stabilizes emotion by stabilizing attention. One task. One direction. This reduces internal noise. Noise is not intensity. It is inefficiency. Efficiency requires focus. Focus requires protection. You don't need their permission to protect your attention. Notifications are requests, not commands. Treat them accordingly. Most people treat interruption as obligation. This belief must be removed. Availability is not discipline. Constant availability erodes authority. When you respond to everything, you commit to nothing. Attention must be allocated deliberately, not surrendered automatically. That's the key. Distraction also disguises itself as productivity. You reply. You check. You consume. You feel active. But activity without direction is drift. Drift feels busy. It leads nowhere. Stillness restores direction. When you remove distraction, resistance appears. Restlessness. Impulse. The urge to check. This is not a problem. It is withdrawal. It proves the habit exists. Do not escape it. Observe it. Sit with the urge without acting. This is training. Each time you resist distraction, control strengthens. You are teaching the mind a new rule. Stay. That's the key. Distraction weakens long-term consistency. Goals require sustained effort. Effort requires attention. Attention requires stillness. Without stillness, discipline collapses under repetition. People quit not because goals are hard, but because focus cannot be maintained. They lose continuity. Continuity builds identity. Identity sustains discipline. Distraction interrupts that chain. Guarding attention is not intensity. It is restraint. Restraint is strength. Most people attempt to fight distraction with force. They try harder. They push more. This fails. The solution is removal. Remove excess input. Reduce noise. Less stimulation. More depth. Depth creates understanding. Understanding creates control. That's the sequence. Distraction is also social. Other people project their lack of focus onto you. They interrupt. They demand. They assume availability. You are not required to comply. Boundaries protect attention. Boundaries are not explanations. They are decisions. Stillness allows you to hold boundaries without defensiveness. You respond when appropriate. Not immediately. This changes behavior around you. Because control is felt instinctively. Distraction also operates internally. Mental loops. Replayed conversations. Imagined scenarios. These consume attention quietly. Stillness interrupts internal distraction the same way it interrupts external noise. Notice the thought. Do not chase it. Let it pass. This returns attention to the present. Presence is where control lives. That's the key. Examine how you start your day. Most people give their attention away immediately. Messages first. Updates first. Noise first. This sets reaction as default. Instead, decide focus before exposure. One priority. One direction. Attention follows decision. Without decision, it follows stimulus. Stimulus-driven behavior is not freedom. It is drift. Guard the first hour. It determines the rest. Stillness early creates stability later. The same applies throughout the day. When switching tasks, pause briefly. Reset attention deliberately. Do not carry residue forward. Residue accumulates. Accumulation creates fatigue. Fatigue increases distraction. The cycle repeats. Stillness breaks the cycle. Single tasking is discipline. Multitasking is distraction wearing a mask. You have a choice. Finish what you start. Or scatter effort. Completion builds confidence. Fragmentation builds frustration. That's the key. Distraction also creates impatience. When attention jumps constantly, waiting feels intolerable. Tolerance decreases. This makes discipline harder. Stillness rebuilds tolerance. You learn to stay with effort. Effort becomes familiar. Familiarity reduces resistance. Resistance is what people call lack of motivation. Motivation is unreliable. Discipline is not. Discipline depends on attention. Attention must be guarded. Guarding attention is an active practice. Not once. Daily. Reduce inputs. Define focus windows. Pause before shifting. Notice when attention slips. Return it calmly. No judgment. Judgment is another distraction. Observation is correction. Correction builds discipline. You don't need their permission to disengage mentally. Just because something exists does not require your attention. Attention is your leverage. Spend it carefully. When attention is protected, time expands. Clarity improves. Decisions sharpen. Results stabilize. This is not intensity. It is alignment. Alignment removes friction. Friction wastes effort. Most people exhaust themselves fighting distraction. Controlled individuals remove it. That's the key. This chapter was about protecting the pause. Because the pause cannot survive in noise. Without attention, stillness collapses. And without stillness, discipline cannot hold. Now you understand why distraction is the real enemy of control. But attention alone is not enough. Attention must be applied consistently. Consistency requires structure. Without structure, focus dissolves under choice. Next, you will learn how structure stabilizes discipline and turns stillness into something reliable. Structure is not control imposed on you. It is control created by you. Most people resist structure because they misunderstand it. They think structure limits freedom. They think it removes flexibility. They think it makes life rigid. They are wrong. Structure removes friction. Friction is what drains discipline. That's the key. When there is no structure, the mind must decide constantly. What to do next? When to do it? How long to stay? This constant decision-making exhausts control. Discipline does not fail because people are weak. It fails because they are overloaded. Structure reduces overload. It decides in advance so you do not negotiate with yourself in the moment. Negotiation invites emotion. Emotion disrupts discipline. You have a choice. Rely on willpower. Or rely on structure. Willpower fluctuates. Structure holds. People who appear disciplined are not forcing themselves constantly. They are following systems that remove unnecessary choice. This is not rigidity. It is efficiency. Stillness survives inside structure because uncertainty is reduced. When you know what comes next, reaction slows naturally. The mind stops scanning. It settles. That's the key. Most emotional reactions happen in unstructured time. Between tasks. Between plans. Between expectations. This is where impulse enters. Structure closes these gaps. It creates smooth transitions. Transitions without structure invite distraction. Distraction breaks focus. Focus collapse leads to frustration. Frustration fuels reaction. Structure breaks this chain. Observe your own behavior. When do you lose control most often? It is rarely during deep work. It is during uncertainty. Structure eliminates uncertainty. This is why routines work. Routines reduce negotiation. Negotiation is emotional labor. Discipline does not need emotion. It needs consistency. That's the key. Structure also limits choice intentionally. Too many options weaken commitment. When everything is possible, nothing is anchored. Anchoring attention requires constraint. Constraint focuses effort. Focused effort produces results. This applies everywhere. Work. Habits. Communication. Decide in advance. When you wake. When you train. When you work. When you disconnect. Do not leave these decisions to mood. Mood is unreliable. Structure removes mood from leadership. You don't need their permission to organize your life this way. If you do not set structure, external demands will set it for you. Their urgency becomes your schedule. Their priorities replace yours. That is how control is lost quietly. Structure defends time. Time defended becomes leverage. Leverage compounds. That's the key. Structure also protects stillness. When time is unstructured, stillness feels like avoidance. When time is structured, stillness becomes preparation. You know when to act. And when not to. This clarity reduces anxiety. Anxiety comes from uncertainty. Structure reduces uncertainty. Stillness thrives where certainty exists. People think freedom means open time. It does not. Open time invites distraction. Freedom comes from intentional time. Time with purpose. Purpose removes guilt from rest. Rest becomes recovery. Recovery improves performance. Performance stabilizes confidence. Confidence reduces reaction. That's the sequence. Structure must be simple. Complex systems collapse under pressure. Simple rules hold. Start times. End times. Clear blocks. No constant adjustments. Consistency builds trust with yourself. Trust reduces internal conflict. Conflict fuels hesitation. Structure removes hesitation. You move because the system moves you. This is discipline without strain. Stillness before action becomes automatic because the environment supports it. Your surroundings shape behavior. Structure designs surroundings intentionally. Remove triggers. Create cues. This is not weakness. It is strategy. Controlled individuals engineer conditions. They do not rely on impulse. That's the key. Structure also trains patience. When outcomes are scheduled, urgency decreases. You are less reactive because you are less rushed. Rushing creates mistakes. Mistakes create emotional responses. Structure slows the process just enough to protect accuracy. Accuracy produces confidence. Confidence stabilizes behavior. You have a choice. Live reactively. Or live architecturally. Reactive living responds to pressure. Architectural living designs around pressure. Stillness belongs to the architect. Reaction belongs to the improviser. Improvisation has its place. But discipline is built on repeatability. Repeatability requires structure. This is where freedom actually appears. When discipline is consistent, choice expands. Because energy is preserved. Because attention is protected. Because emotion is regulated. Structure is not control over life. It is control over response. That's the key. Begin with one area. Morning. Work. Evening. Create a simple framework. Honor it. Do not optimize endlessly. Stability first. Refinement later. Structure must be lived, not admired. Its power comes from repetition. Once structure holds, stillness becomes natural. And when stillness is reliable, another layer of discipline becomes possible. Because control is not only about time. It is about expression. What you say. When you speak. Unstructured speech leaks authority. You now understand how structure stabilizes control and protects the pause. But control must also govern communication. Because words spoken without restraint undo discipline quickly. Next, you will learn how silence multiplies authority and prevents unnecessary conflict. Silence is not absence. It is control withheld deliberately. Most people speak too quickly. Not because they have something important to say, but because silence makes them uncomfortable. They fill space to relieve tension. This habit weakens authority. That's the key. When you speak without restraint, you give away position. Words cannot be taken back. Once released, they shape perception. Controlled individuals understand this. They do not rush to explain. They do not rush to defend. They do not rush to respond. They let silence work first. Silence creates leverage. It slows the exchange. It shifts attention. It places pressure on the other side. This is not manipulation. It is timing. Timing determines impact. You have a choice. Speak to relieve discomfort. Or remain silent to maintain control. Most people choose relief. Relief feels good momentarily. It costs later. Silence costs momentarily. It pays later. That's the trade. Silence strengthens control because it prevents unnecessary reactions. When you speak immediately, you react. When you wait, you respond. Response is chosen. Reaction is released. This distinction defines discipline. Words spoken under emotion carry emotion forward. They escalate. They invite response. Silence interrupts escalation. Most conflicts survive on continued input. Remove input, and tension fades. Stillness starves unnecessary conflict. That's the key. Many people believe silence means agreement. It does not. Silence means you are not rushed. It means you are not pressured into expression. Control does not require constant clarification. It requires correct timing. When something is said to provoke you, silence denies the reaction they expect. This changes the dynamic. Power shifts quietly. You don't need their permission to remain silent. No one can force speech. Speech is voluntary. Voluntary restraint is authority. Silence also improves accuracy. When you pause before speaking, thoughts settle. Emotion reduces. Clarity increases. The words you eventually choose carry more weight. Because they are fewer. Because they are deliberate. Because they are clean. That's the key. People respect clarity. Clarity requires stillness. Stillness requires silence. Most overcommunication comes from insecurity. The need to be understood immediately. The need to be validated. The need to control perception. These needs create noise. Noise weakens message. Silence removes noise. When you do speak, the message lands. Silence also protects you from saying the wrong thing. Under pressure, the mind grabs whatever is available. Often, that is not what you mean. Later, regret appears. Silence prevents this. It buys time. Time allows evaluation. Evaluation improves outcome. That's the sequence. Stillness before speech is the same skill as stillness before action. The principle is identical. Pause. Observe. Choose. Most people skip the pause. They speak to fill space. Controlled individuals let space exist. Space is not dangerous. Space is informative. It reveals intent. It exposes urgency. People who rush you to speak are often seeking control. Silence resists that control. You have a choice. Silence also builds internal discipline. When you resist the urge to speak, you train restraint. Restraint strengthens regulation. Regulation stabilizes behavior. This is cumulative. Each moment of silence adds to control capacity. It is quiet training. No one sees it. But it compounds. Silence is especially powerful under criticism. Criticism invites defense. Defense accelerates emotion. Emotion clouds judgment. Silence short-circuits this pattern. Let criticism land. Do not agree. Do not argue. Just listen. Most criticism collapses when not fed. What remains may be useful. Extract that. Discard the rest. You don't need their permission to ignore what is not useful. That's the key. Silence also reduces overcommitment. When asked for something, immediate responses create pressure. You say yes too fast. Later, you regret it. Silence creates space to evaluate cost. Cost includes time, energy, attention. Resources are finite. Silence protects them. A delayed response is not avoidance. It is filtration. Only what survives the pause deserves commitment. Stillness guards this filter. People who respect themselves respect their own timing. Others follow that lead. Silence sets expectations. It signals stability. Stability attracts trust. Trust increases influence. Influence does not come from talking more. It comes from saying less with precision. That's the key. Silence also applies internally. Internal dialogue often runs unchecked. Justifications, explanations, rehearsals. This internal noise drives emotional reactions. Reduce commentary. Observe thoughts without engaging. This is internal silence. Internal silence stabilizes mood. Mood stability improves decisions. The same principle applies everywhere. Silence before thought. Silence before speech. Silence before action. Stillness is the thread. Most people believe authority must be asserted verbally. It does not. Authority is felt. It comes from consistency, from restraint, from timing. Silence supports all three. This does not mean you never speak. It means you speak deliberately. When you do speak, be clear. Short statements. Clean boundaries. No over-explanation. Explanation invites negotiation. Negotiation invites pressure. Silence avoids unnecessary negotiation. You have a choice. Speak to be understood immediately. Or wait to be respected consistently. Respect lasts longer. Silence also protects energy. Talking drains attention. Explaining drains focus. Defending drains emotional reserves. Silence conserves all three. Conserved energy strengthens discipline. Discipline enables consistency. Consistency builds results. That's the chain. Silence is not passive. It is active restraint. Restraint requires effort. Effort invested here prevents larger effort later. Most people exhaust themselves fixing what silence could have prevented. Controlled individuals prevent first. Then act. This is strategic. Begin practicing this intentionally. When the urge to speak appears, pause. Do not suppress. Just wait. Notice what changes. Often, the urge passes. If something still needs to be said, say it cleanly. No emotion. No excess. Precision. Only. You don't need their permission to remain quiet. Silence is not a gap to fill. It is a position to hold. The more you hold it, the stronger it becomes. This chapter was about restraint in expression. Because control leaks through words faster than through actions. Silence preserves authority. Authority stabilizes discipline. Discipline protects stillness. Stillness is the foundation. But silence alone is not enough. Silence must be paired with the ability to remain steady under pressure. Because pressure will test everything you have built. Next, you will learn how to hold control when stress increases and stakes rise. Pressure changes behavior. Not because people are weak. Because systems are tested when stress increases. What you practiced in calm moments is challenged under pressure. This is where discipline is proven. That's the key. Most people lose control under pressure because their pause is conditional. It exists when life is manageable. It disappears when stakes rise. Pressure compresses time. It creates the feeling that everything must happen now. That feeling is deceptive. Under pressure, speed increases. Evaluation decreases. This is why mistakes multiply. Pressure does not require reaction. It requires regulation. You have a choice. Pressure reveals defaults. When stress appears, you do not rise to your ideals. You fall to your habits. If the pause is not trained, pressure removes it instantly. This is not failure. It is feedback. Feedback shows where training must deepen. Stillness under pressure is not accidental. It is practiced in advance. This chapter is about holding control when your nervous system wants to rush. Because pressure attacks internally first. Heart rate increases. Breath shortens. Muscles tighten. The body prepares for action. That preparation is useful. But only if directed. Without direction, it becomes panic. Stillness directs energy. Stillness does not remove intensity. It organizes it. That's the key. Most people try to think their way through pressure. This fails. Pressure is physiological. The body must be addressed first. Slow the breath. Lower the shoulders. Ground the posture. These actions signal safety. When the body stabilizes, the mind regains clarity. You cannot reason clearly in a destabilized body. Stillness begins physically. This is not relaxation. It is control. Controlled breathing slows time perception. When time feels slower, choice becomes visible again. You have a choice. Pressure often comes from consequences. Deadlines. Expectations. Risk. The mind exaggerates these. It imagines worst outcomes. This imagination fuels urgency. Urgency pushes reaction. Stillness interrupts imagination. Bring attention back to the present. What is actually happening now? Not what might happen later. Pressure lives in the future. Control lives in the present. That's the key. Under pressure, people overact. They say too much. They do too much. They decide too much. Excess is a stress response. Excess creates errors. Errors increase pressure. The cycle accelerates. Stillness reduces output. Less movement. Less speech. Fewer decisions. This is counterintuitive. But it works. Under pressure, fewer actions with higher accuracy outperform many rushed actions. Precision beats volume. Always. Pressure also exposes attachment to outcome. You want resolution. You want certainty. Attachment narrows focus. Narrow focus ignores alternatives. Stillness widens perspective. When perspective widens, pressure loses dominance. You see options. Options restore control. That's the key. Most pressure is interpreted personally. If this fails, it means something about me. This interpretation magnifies stress. Pressure becomes identity threatening. Identity pressure collapses discipline. Stillness separates self from outcome. Outcome is an event. You are not the event. This separation reduces emotional load. Reduced load improves performance. Performance stabilizes confidence. Confidence reduces pressure. This is a loop you can control. You have a choice. Pressure also tempts shortcuts. Fast solutions. Incomplete fixes. Temporary relief. Shortcuts feel efficient. They are not. They postpone cost. Later, the cost returns with interest. Stillness resists shortcuts. It insists on correct process even when stressed. Correct process under pressure is discipline. Discipline preserves long-term stability. Stability is power. That's the key. Notice how pressure affects communication. Under stress, people explain more. They justify more. They seek reassurance. This weakens position. Stillness simplifies communication. Short statements. Clear decisions. Silence when unsure. Silence under pressure signals strength. It tells others you are not overwhelmed. Even if internally there is tension. Control is not absence of tension. It is containment of tension. Containment requires stillness. Pressure tests containment. Training builds it. This training must be deliberate. Expose yourself to manageable stress. Hold the pause there. Small pressures prepare you for larger ones. Avoidance weakens tolerance. Exposure strengthens it. This is how resilience is built. Not through comfort. Through controlled challenge. Stillness must be practiced when you want to rush. Especially then. That's the key. Under pressure, do not aim to feel calm. Aim to feel stable. Calm is emotional. Stability is structural. Stability comes from routine. From breath. From posture. From practiced restraint. You cannot invent control in a crisis. You rely on what is trained. If the pause is optional, pressure removes it. If the pause is standard, pressure tests it but does not erase it. You have a choice. Make the pause non-negotiable. Under pressure, pause first. Even briefly. Especially briefly. That moment of restraint can prevent hours of correction. Most costly mistakes happen under pressure. Not because the person was incapable. Because they rushed. Stillness reduces error rate. Error reduction improves outcomes. This is measurable. High performers do not panic less. They regulate faster. Regulation speed matters. The faster you stabilize, the faster clarity returns. Clarity guides action. Action becomes effective. Pressure does not disappear. But it stops controlling you. That's the difference. Pressure becomes information. Not command. You respond deliberately. This is authority under stress. Authority is felt. Others sense it. It influences environments. It calms situations. Because control is contagious. Just like panic. You decide which you spread. You have a choice. Begin practicing now. When pressure appears today, notice it. Do not judge it. Pause physically. Slow the breath. Ground the body. Then decide the next action based on clarity, not relief. Relief can wait. Correctness cannot. Over time, pressure becomes less intimidating. Not because life is easier. Because you are steadier. Steadiness is earned. It is trained. Stillness is how it is built. This chapter was about holding control when intensity rises. Because discipline that collapses under pressure is not discipline yet. You now understand how to stabilize yourself when stakes increase and speed tries to take over. But pressure is not the final challenge. Even steady individuals leak energy over time. Energy determines endurance. And endurance determines consistency. Next, you will learn why energy is finite and how to stop wasting it unconsciously. Energy is not unlimited. It never was. Most people behave as if it is. They spend it casually. They leak it constantly. They notice only when it is gone. That is when discipline collapses. That's the key. Energy determines endurance. Endurance determines consistency. Consistency determines results. When energy is wasted, everything else weakens. Most people blame motivation. They say they feel tired. They say they feel drained. The problem is not effort. It is leakage. Energy leaks through reaction. Through distraction. Through unnecessary emotion. You have a choice. Energy is lost long before exhaustion appears. It is lost in small moments. Explaining things that do not require explanation. Reacting to situations that do not require response. Thinking about problems that do not require action yet. Each instance feels insignificant. Together, they are destructive. Energy loss is cumulative. That's the key. Most people confuse busyness with productivity. They move constantly. They engage constantly. Movement feels active. Activity feels productive. But energy is consumed either way. Only directed effort returns value. Undirected effort is waste. Stillness prevents waste. When you pause before acting, you evaluate cost. Is this worth my energy? Most reactions are not. Most distractions are not. Most emotional expressions are not. Stillness filters these out. This preserves energy for what matters. You have a choice. Energy also leaks through internal conflict. Arguing with yourself. Doubting decisions repeatedly. Replaying conversations. This consumes enormous reserves. The mind runs constantly. The body follows. Fatigue appears without physical effort. Stillness quiets this conflict. When decisions are made deliberately, they are not revisited endlessly. Clarity reduces internal noise. Noise is energy loss. That's the key. Notice how much energy is spent trying to control perception. Explaining yourself. Defending choices. Seeking understanding. This is exhausting. Control does not require constant explanation. Silence preserves energy. So does restraint. So does choosing not to engage. You don't need their permission to disengage from unnecessary exchanges. Not every interaction deserves your energy. Energy spent socially is still energy spent. Spend it deliberately. Most people are exhausted not because life is hard, but because they are available to everything. Availability drains reserves. Boundaries protect them. That's the key. Energy also leaks through anticipation. Worrying about future outcomes. Imagining scenarios. Rehearsing responses. This creates stress before action is required. Stress consumes energy. Often for no return. Stillness brings attention back to the present. The present is manageable. The future is imagined. Energy spent on imagination rarely produces results. Energy spent on present action does. You have a choice. Energy management is not about doing less. It is about doing less unnecessarily. High performers are not inactive. They are selective. They remove low-return actions. They reduce emotional expenditure. They conserve energy for moments that matter. This is not laziness. It is strategy. Stillness supports strategy by slowing impulse. Impulse wastes energy. Discipline preserves it. That's the key. Notice how fatigue affects behavior. When energy drops, reaction increases. Distraction becomes harder to resist. Emotion feels heavier. This is not moral failure. It is depletion. Depletion removes restraint. Restraint requires energy. This is why energy must be protected proactively, not repaired after collapse. Stillness helps early detection. When you pause regularly, you notice fatigue sooner. Early correction prevents breakdown. Breakdowns are expensive. Recovery takes time. Time lost cannot be replaced. Energy preserved compounds. That's the sequence. Energy is also wasted through multitasking. Switching attention rapidly burns cognitive fuel. Each switch carries cost. Single tasking conserves energy. Completion restores it. Fragmentation drains it. Stillness supports single tasking by reducing internal urgency. Urgency pushes switching. Switching reduces depth. Depth produces quality. Quality reduces rework. Rework wastes energy. Stillness eliminates rework indirectly. By improving accuracy. That's the key. Most people think rest is the solution. Rest matters. But rest alone does not fix leakage. If habits remain unchanged, energy will be lost again. Stillness changes habits. It teaches restraint. Restraint prevents unnecessary output. This is energy discipline. Energy discipline sustains long-term effort. Without it, even talented individuals burn out. Burnout is not weakness. It is unmanaged expenditure. You have a choice. Energy also leaks through constant evaluation. Judging yourself. Comparing progress. Measuring worth. This internal monitoring consumes attention. Attention costs energy. Stillness reduces self-surveillance. You do the work. Then you stop thinking about it. This preserves reserves. Results accumulate quietly. Confidence grows without effort. Confidence reduces emotional strain. Emotional strain drains energy. That's the key. Notice how often you act to relieve discomfort. Checking the phone. Changing tasks. Seeking stimulation. These actions feel relieving. Relief is temporary. They cost energy long term. Stillness tolerates discomfort briefly to preserve energy later. This is discipline. Discipline delays relief to protect endurance. Endurance outperforms intensity. Always. Energy is what allows you to stay consistent when others quit. Consistency wins quietly. It does not announce itself. It compounds. Stillness is what allows consistency to continue without exhaustion. Stillness removes friction. Friction burns fuel. Remove friction, and effort becomes sustainable. You don't need their permission to operate efficiently. Efficiency is internal. Others may mistake it for calm. It is control. Energy management is invisible. Its results are not. People who conserve energy outlast those who chase stimulation. They remain steady. Steadiness attracts opportunity. Opportunity rewards preparation. Preparation requires endurance. Endurance requires energy. That's the chain. Begin observing where your energy goes. Not dramatically. Simply notice. What drains you? What restores you? Reduce the drains that offer no return. Protect the habits that restore. Stillness makes this visible. Without stillness, leakage remains unnoticed. You have a choice. Energy is not meant to be spent reacting. It is meant to be invested deliberately. Invested energy compounds. Wasted energy disappears. The difference determines long-term outcomes. This chapter was about conservation. Not avoidance. Not withdrawal. Strategic preservation. Because without energy, discipline cannot continue. You now understand why endurance matters and how stillness protects it. But conserving energy is not enough. Energy must also be directed correctly. Direction determines identity. Identity determines behavior. And behavior must align consistently with who you choose to be. Next, you will learn how to make discipline part of your identity so control becomes automatic. The pause cannot be optional. Anything optional disappears under pressure. This is the final distinction. Most people understand the pause intellectually. They even practice it sometimes. But they treat it as a technique. Techniques fail when stress rises. That's the key. Control only lasts when it becomes standard. Not something you remember to do. Something you default to. This chapter is about that shift. From effort to identity. From practice to rule. When the pause is non-negotiable, reaction no longer leads. Choice does. You have a choice. But that choice must be protected structurally. If the pause depends on mood, it will fail. If it depends on memory, it will fail. If it depends on motivation, it will fail. Motivation fluctuates. Standards do not. Non-negotiable means you pause first. Always. Before speaking. Before deciding. Before committing. Not sometimes. Not when it feels easy. Every time. That's the key. Most people allow exceptions. I was tired. I was under pressure. I didn't have time. These are not reasons. They are signals. Signals that the pause was needed most. Exceptions train inconsistency. Inconsistency weakens identity. When identity weakens, discipline collapses. Identity is built through repetition without exception. This is how habits become automatic. The brain stops negotiating. The pause happens. This is not effort. It is alignment. Alignment reduces friction. Friction drains energy. You have a choice. Make the pause a rule. Rules simplify behavior. They remove debate. There is no question. You pause. Then you choose. This applies internally as well. Before reacting to a thought, pause. Before following a narrative, pause. Thoughts do not require obedience. They require evaluation. Evaluation requires stillness. Stillness must be default. That's the key. When the pause becomes non-negotiable, something changes quietly. You stop being surprised by yourself. You stop saying things you regret. You stop committing to things that drain you. Not because life is easier. Because behavior is stable. Stability creates trust. Trust in yourself. That trust reduces internal conflict. Conflict wastes energy. Energy preserved compounds. You become consistent. Consistency builds identity. Identity simplifies decision-making. The loop closes. This is control. Control is not tension. It is absence of chaos. Most people live in constant correction. Fixing words. Fixing decisions. Fixing reactions. Correction is expensive. Prevention is efficient. The pause is prevention. That's the key. When something is non-negotiable, others adapt. Not because you explain it. Because you embody it. Your timing changes. Your responses slow. Your words shorten. People feel this shift. They adjust expectations. Pressure decreases. Not because demands disappear. Because you are no longer reactive. Reactive people invite pressure. Controlled people resist it naturally. This is not dominance. It is steadiness. Steadiness changes dynamics. You don't need their permission to operate this way. No one can remove your pause. Only you can. That responsibility matters. Responsibility is not blame. It is ownership. Ownership stabilizes behavior. When you own the pause, you own outcomes. Not all outcomes, but your contribution to them. That is enough. That's the key. Non-negotiable standards feel restrictive at first. Because impulse loses freedom. Impulse will resist. It will demand expression. It will claim urgency. Let it speak. Do not obey. Impulse fades when not reinforced. The pause strengthens instead. This is a transfer of authority. From reaction to discipline. From emotion to structure. From speed to clarity. Over time, the pause becomes effortless. Not because effort increased. Because friction decreased. You no longer fight yourself. You simply wait. Waiting reveals truth. Truth informs action. Action becomes clean. Clean action compounds. This is how high-level control works. Quietly. Without drama. Without explanation. Most people believe discipline is aggressive. It is not. It is calm consistency. Aggression burns energy. Consistency preserves it. Preserved energy sustains long horizons. Short horizons create urgency. Urgency destroys control. Non-negotiable pause removes urgency at the root. That's the key. Notice how life feels when reactions slow. Time expands. Clarity improves. Stress reduces. Not because demands disappeared. Because you are no longer chasing them. You move deliberately. Deliberate movement creates leverage. Leverage multiplies effort. Effort multiplied produces results. This is not motivation. This is mechanics. Mechanics do not care how you feel. They work when applied consistently. Consistency is identity. Identity is behavior repeated without exception. Make the pause your identity. Not something you practice. Something you are. When this happens, everything else aligns. Focus holds. Emotion regulates. Energy conserves. Structure supports. Silence strengthens. Pressure tests, but does not break. This is the integrated system. Stillness at the center. The pause as the gatekeeper. Nothing enters action without passing through it. That's the design. And it works. You have a choice. Make the pause conditional and lose it when it matters. Or make it non-negotiable and keep control under all conditions. There is no middle ground. Standards either hold or they collapse. Choose what you will enforce. Not tomorrow. Now. From this moment forward, pause first. Every time. No explanation. No exception. Hold the pause. Let it shape your decisions. Let it protect your energy. Let it define your identity. Because the person who controls the pause controls their life. Every reaction costs you something. Energy. Clarity. Position. The pause gives it back. Not tomorrow. Not when life slows down. Now. You do not need more effort. You need restraint. Pause before you speak. Pause before you decide. Pause before you move. That space is not weakness. It is command. From this moment forward, refuse speed without clarity. Refuse urgency without evaluation. Refuse action without pause. Make the pause your rule. Protect it daily. Because the person who controls the pause controls the outcome.